47 officials fired, to $1 billion vanished. 126 times Donald Trump promised one thing: revenge. And tonight, in front of 50 million Americans, Jasmine Crockett stares him down and unleashes the truth that shakes the entire nation. When a president turns the FBI into his personal weapon of vengeance, how long before America itself becomes the victim? Stay with us. This is a story worth every second of your time. To broadcast cut in with a jolt every channel, every feed, every phone screen in America froze on one image. The U.S. Capitol, its chamber packed, its silence louder than thunder. This was not just politics, this was a showdown. Tonight, the fate of truth and the future of democracy are about to clash in front of 50 million Americans. Live, unfiltered, unforgiving. At the center stood Jasmine Crockett, her hands resting firmly on the wooden table, her eyes burning like twin blades of steel. She was not just a congresswoman, she was the daughter of a forgotten America, the voice for those silenced by money, by power, by fear. Every wrinkle of pain from her community, every tear shed by mothers who lost sons to injustice, every ballot tossed aside in voter suppression, it all lived in her gaze tonight. She was here not just to speak, but to fight. The air cracked when the chamber doors burst open. Donald Trump entered. His presence hit the room like a storm surge, swagger in his walk, defiance in his smirk, the aura of a man who believed he owned not just the room, but the country. Cameras zoomed in, the red tie perfectly knotted, the jaw clenched, the eyes daring anyone to defy him. He didn't need to shout, his very existence was intimidation. The room bent toward him like gravity, but Jasmine did not move. She met his stare head on. And then the headline dropped on screens across America. Worse than we imagined, not from CNN, not from MSNBC, but from the Wall Street Journal, the voice of conservatives, the paper Trump once bragged loved him. The editorial board had cut through the nose, declaring that Trump's second rise to power was not policy, it was vengeance, raw and unmasked. Every American watching knew what that meant. If even his allies called it dangerous, then the darkness ran deeper than anyone dared admit. The chamber's silence thickened into suffocation. Protesters outside clashed, chants of no more vengeance collided with roars of retribution now. Helicopters hovered above, their blades slicing through the tension. The Capitol wasn't just a building anymore, it was a battlefield. Jasmine inhaled slowly, her chest rising with the weight of millions who depended on her. She thought of every child in her district told it didn't matter, every grandmother turned away from the polls, every life Trump had turned into collateral damage for his pride. This wasn't just politics. This was survival. Her eyes locked on Trump again, and the nation leaned closer to their screens. The stage was set, the actors in place, the world holding its breath. And in that breathless pause came the question, louder than any chant, sharper than any headline: when power turns into a weapon for revenge, who dares to stand against it? The first jolt came on Friday afternoon. Sirens wailed in Bethesda, Maryland, and neighbors froze at the sight of FBI agents hauling boxes from John Bolton's home. For years, Bolton had been the hawkish face of American foreign policy, Trump's national security advisor, who once whispered strategy into the president's ear. Now, his quiet suburban street looked like a crime scene, flashing lights reflecting off black SUVs, the image seared onto TV screens across the nation. It wasn't just an investigation, it looked like punishment. Bolton's story with Trump was the arc of loyalty turned to betrayal, a lie turned enemy. He had stood beside Trump in the Oval Office, pushed for hardline policies, defended the administration against critics. But when the cracks showed, when Trump demanded loyalty over truth, Bolton broke ranks. He was fired in 2019, and in defiance, wrote The Room Where It Happened, a memoir that revealed secrets Trump fought desperately to bury. The White House tried to block its release, claiming classified material, but it passed review. Trump lost that battle and he never forgot it. Now, America was watching payback unfold in real time. Jasmine Crockett studied the raid footage with the precision of a surgeon. Every detail mattered. The warrants, the timing, the source. A chilling thread emerged. The order had been greenlit by Kash Patel, Trump's loyal enforcer, armed with intelligence funneled from John Ratcliffe to Jasmine. The pattern was unmistakable. This wasn't national security, it was vengeance codified into law enforcement. The numbers told their own story. 126 times That's how often Trump had promised revenge in rallies since 2022, each clip replayed like a mantra, his voice echoing through arenas packed with red hats. I will have retribution. I will crush my enemies, what had once been dismissed as campaign bluster now looked like prophecy fulfilled. And Bolton, once an insider, had become exhibit of what happened to anyone who defied him. The weight of that reality pressed down on Jasmine as she prepared for her own confrontation. Alone in her office, under the dim glow of a desk lamp, she pored over files stacked like ammunition. Transcripts of Trump's speeches, financial records of secretive spending, testimonies from staffers who feared retaliation. Each piece of paper was a weapon. She sharpened her arguments not as a lawyer would, but as a warrior forging blades before battle. Her hands trembled once, only once, as the magnitude of the fight loomed before her. She wasn't just going up against Trump. She was going up against the machinery of vengeance itself. Outside, America simmered with unease. Protests grew louder, conservative voices fractured. The Wall Street Journal had warned it was worse than anyone imagined. Yet deep down, Jasmine knew the truth. This was only the beginning. The raid on Bolton was not an isolated strike. It was the opening act of a campaign that could consume anyone who stood in Trump's path. And as she looked into the camera, rehearsing her first words, the question that burned in her chest was not just what she would say, but whether the country was ready to hear it. Because if vengeance had already claimed one man at the heart of Tower, how long before it came for the nation itself? The night before the hearing, Washington pulsed like a city under siege. Barricades rose around the Capitol, floodlights swept the darkened sky, and chants from the streets pierced through the silence of power. On one side, thousands roared no more vengeance, their voices echoing off the marble columns like thunder. On the other, a crimson sea of Trump supporters chanted retribution now, fists pumping in rhythm, as if preparing for war. The entire nation had spilled into the Capitol, and the ground itself seemed to vibrate under the weight of division. Inside her office, Jasmine Crockett stood at the window, watching the clash unfold below. To some, she was just another politician. But tonight, she was something more, a vessel for the silenced, a shield for the powerless, the last line of defense between democracy and a man who would weaponize it. Every protester outside holding a sigh, every student live streaming on TikTok, every grandmother whispering prayers at her kitchen table, they were all with her. Invisible yet undeniable, she felt their weight pressing against her chest, and it fueled her resolve. Across town, Trump prepared in a gilded suite, basking in the adoration of loyalists who cheered his every word. He reveled in the chaos outside the Capitol, calling it proof of his unmatched power. To him, the hearing was not a trial, it was a stage, another rally disguised as law, another chance to humiliate an enemy before millions. He thrived in spectacle, and tomorrow promised the greatest spectacle yet. Reporters swarmed the Capitol steps, cameras flashing, headlines exploding before a single word had been spoken. Crockett versus Trump, democracy on trial blared across screens. The air was electric with suspense, the kind that clings to the skin and tightens the throat. Politicians whispered in hallways, aides clutched folders like lifelines, and security braced for the inevitable eruption. It wasn't just a hearing, it was a collision course, and the world knew it. When Jasmine finally turned away from the window, her decision was made. She gathered her notes, each page etched with evidence sharp enough to cut through lies. She rehearsed lines not for herself, but for the millions who had no microphone, no seat at the table, no shield against retaliation. Tomorrow, she would be their voice, unflinching and afraid. And as she closed her eyes for a moment's rest, a single truth burned through the nose. This was no longer about John Bolton, no longer about one man's vendetta. This was about the soul of America itself. By dawn, the stage was ready. Protesters filled the avenues, the Capitol steps trembled under the roar of divided chants, and news helicopters carved circles in the dawn sky. The doors of Congress would soon open, and when they did, the whole world would witness fire and fury like never before. Because what happens when truth collides with raw power is not a question of politics, it is a question of survival. The gavel struck and silence spread like a shockwave across the chamber. The cameras panned, millions of eyes fixed on one woman. Jasmine Crockett rose slowly, every movement deliberate, her presence radiating both composure and fury. The weight of the nation pressed on her shoulders, but her voice carried the fire of those who had been silenced too long. Mr. Chairman, members of this committee, and the American people watching, she began, her tone sharp enough to cut glass. What you saw in Bethesda was not law enforcement, it was retribution. The FBI was not acting as the guardian of national security, it was weaponized as the personal hit squad of Donald Trump. Gasps rippled through the chamber, her words hit like a grenade, fragments of accusation piercing through every corner of the room. For a moment, even the cameras seemed to lean closer, capturing the fire in her eyes as she drove the first blow. This is not justice, this is vengeance in uniform. This is not the rule of law, this is Donald Trump's rule of fear. Before the echoes faded, Trump leaned forward, gripping the microphone with both hands. His voice erupted like a cannon, laced with venom and contempt. You Crockett, you are nothing but a political hitwoman, a dog of the Democrats. His words snapped through the chamber, his finger jabbing the air like a weapon. Don't pretend you care about justice. You are a disgrace, a puppet, and America knows it. The chamber exploded in chaos. Gasps, shouts, and murmurs rattled the marble walls. Some Republicans slammed their fists on the table, demanding order, while Democrats shouted back in outrage. Reporters' fingers flew across keyboards, headlines already being written in real time. Trump calls Crockett Democrat dog in live hearing. Jasmine did not flinch. She let the insult hang in the air, her silence a dagger of its own. The camera zoomed in on her face, her jaw tight, her eyes unblinking, her composure a stark contrast to the fury raging across the room. Then she leaned into the microphone, her voice low, steady, each word striking like a drumbeat. You can call me a dog, you can call me a hitwoman, you can call me whatever names you want, but the truth doesn't bend to your insults, and the American people know it. You have turned our institutions into weapons against your enemies. You have turned the FBI into your personal army. And you think intimidation will silence me? She paused, the silence hanging heavy as the nation held its breath. Not today. Not ever. Across America, living rooms erupted half in fury, half in awe. Hashtags surged to the top of social media. Hashtag Crockett vs. Trump. Hashtag not today, not ever. In Times Square, the giant screen replayed the clash on loop, the crowd reacting as if to a heavyweight fight. The chamber, though ordered back to silence, was forever changed. The first blow had been struck, and the war of words had turned into something far more dangerous, a war for truth itself. And as Trump clenched his fists, his face twisted with rage, one chilling question thundered in the hearts of millions. If this was only the beginning, how far would he go when pushed to the edge? The uproar from Trump's insult had barely settled when Jasmine moved, swift and deliberate. She reached for a thick binder stacked with documents, its edges frayed from nights of preparation. Sliding it onto the table with a thud that echoed through the chamber, she looked directly into the camera, not at Trump, not at the committee, but at the millions of Americans watching at home. Her voice cut through the air like a blade. Let's talk facts, not slogans, not insults. Facts. She flipped the first page, holding it high. 47 officials, career servants of this nation, were fired for one reason: dissent. They didn't steal, they didn't betray. Their only crime was refusing to bow to Donald Trump's thirst for loyalty over law. 47 families destroyed because this man couldn't tolerate the word no. The chamber gasped. Screens across the nation lit up with breaking banners. Crockett. 47 officials purged for dissent. For a heartbeat, even Trump's allies shifted uncomfortably in their seats. But Jasmine wasn't finished. Her hand slammed onto the next page. $21 billion. That's the amount of unexplained classified spending linked to so-called investigations, money that bypassed congressional oversight. $21 billion of taxpayer dollars vanishing into black holes of secrecy, with no accountability, no justification. And who held the strings? Donald Trump himself. Reporters in the press box nearly leapt to their feet, phones buzzing as editors barked orders. Across Twitter, the number trended instantly. $21 billion. Jasmine leaned in closer, her eyes narrowing, her tone sharper, colder. And let's not forget John Bolton, once his advisor, now his target. After an Iranian hit squad placed a $300,000 bounty on Bolton's head, the Trump administration did not protect him. They stripped his security detail. They left him exposed. A man who once sat in the highest councils of power, discarded like trash because he dared to write a book that told the truth. The chamber erupted, audible gasps. whispers like gunfire ricocheting against marble walls. Outside, protesters screamed louder, signs thrust high into the sky, the chants of no more vengeance, merging into a single roar that rattled the windows. Trump lunged forward, slamming the microphone so hard it screeched with feedback. His face flushed crimson, his words a thunderclap. Fake numbers, fake news, lies, all lies. This is a witch hunt. I never fired 47 officials, I never stole $21 billion, and Bolton is a traitor who deserved nothing. His voice cracked with rage, spittle hitting the mic, his fists pounding the table like war drums. But Jasmine did not flinch, her binder still lay open, pages of evidence spread like a battlefield map. She stared at him, unblinking, her silence louder than his screams. The camera zoomed in, capturing her calm against his fury, the image already viral in the making, and in that silence, the nation felt a chill crawl up its spine. If these were only the numbers she was willing to reveal, what darker truths still lay buried beneath the surface? Because if 47 careers, $21 billion, and a man's life could be sacrificed for vengeance, what else was Donald Trump willing to destroy to protect himself? The chamber still trembled from Trump's furious outburst when Jasmine leaned forward, her voice low but razor-sharp. She didn't raise her volume, she didn't need to. The silence that followed Trump's roar made every word land like a hammer on stone. "You don't fear John Bolton," she said, her eyes fixed on him, unflinching. "You fear justice." The words sliced through the chamber like shrapnel. For the first time that night, Trump's face betrayed him. His skin flushed red, his jaw tightened, and a bead of sweat formed at his temple. He opened his mouth to fire back, but nothing came out, only the sound of his breath caught in his throat, heavy and uneven. The camera zoomed in mercilessly, magnifying the image of a man who had built his empire on dominance now visibly shaken. The crowd outside erupted as if they had heard her words through the marble walls. Protesters chanting "No more vengeance" grew louder, their voices rising in triumph. On the other side, Trump loyalists doubled down, screaming retribution now. As clashes broke out on the Capitol steps, police lines strained to hold back the surge of bodies, sirens wailed, and the streets of Washington, D.C. turned into a powder keg waiting for a single spark. On social media, the storm was instantaneous. Hashtags exploded across Twitter. Hashtag fear of justice. Hashtag Crockett strikes. Hashtag Trump exposed. Millions shared the clip of Jasmine's calm declaration against Trump's stunned silence. Memes flooded Instagram and TikTok, comparing Trump's frozen expression to a fighter taking the first punch he couldn't block. The nation was split down the middle, half cheering Jasmine as the defender of democracy, half rallying to Trump's side, demanding vengeance louder than ever. Back inside the chamber, Trump tried to recover, slamming his fist against the table. "That's a lie. I fear nothing. I am the law in this country." His voice cracked, not with power, but with desperation. He pointed at Jasmine, his hand trembling, his words unraveling. You're the traitor here. You want to tear down America." But the force was gone. His voice, once commanding, now wavered under the weight of the truth she had spoken. Jasmine remained still, her gaze unwavering. Her silence in that moment was more devastating than any accusation. Every second he sputtered made him look smaller, weaker, more afraid. For years, he had thrived on turning fear outward, now it turned inward, gnawing at him in front of the world. The air was thick, suffocating, every heartbeat pounding like a drum. This was no longer about statistics, no longer about documents or investigations. This was about exposing the core of a man who had built himself as untouchable, now showing cracks for everyone to see. And as millions watched from their living rooms, holding their breath, one thought consumed the nation. If this was how Donald Trump looked when pressed for the truth, what would happen when the walls closed in further? Because when a man built on vengeance is cornered, there are only two outcomes: he lashes out with chaos, or he crumbles beneath the weight of justice. The silence after Jasmine's strike lasted only seconds before Trump erupted like a bomb detonating in the chamber. He leaned into the microphone, his voice raw and jagged, each word dripping venom. "You are a traitor," he bellowed, his fist slamming against the table. The sound reverberated through the hall, making even seasoned lawmakers flinch. He jabbed a finger at her, his face contorted with rage. "You are a lowlife, a disgrace to this country, an enemy within, working to tear America apart from the inside." The chamber convulsed. Gasps, Shouts, the frantic gavel of the chair calling for order. It was chaos wrapped in spectacle. Trump's words didn't just stay within the walls. They exploded outward, carried instantly by live broadcast into millions of homes. The insults rolled across cable news tickers in red banners. Trump calls Crockett traitor, lowlife, enemy within. Within seconds, clips flooded Twitter and TikTok, replayed on loop, dissected by pundits, igniting an inferno of outrage and support. But Jasmine did not move. She stood still, her back straight, her eyes unblinking, refusing to give him the satisfaction of a reaction. The camera captured the split screen. Trump, red-faced, spit flying, veins pulsing. Jasmine, steady as a statue, the embodiment of defiance. The contrast was devastating. For every word he hurled, her silence grew louder, sharper, cutting deeper than any insult could. "People like you," Trump continued, his voice cracking under its own fury, "don't belong in this Congress. You don't belong in this country. You are poison, you are filth, and America will spit you out." His face glistened with sweat. Under the harsh lights, his breathing heavy, his desperation naked for all to see. The media machine roared into overdrive. CNN, Fox, MSNBC, every outlet replayed the footage in real time, commentators stunned at the sheer brutality of Trump's attack. Some defended him, others condemned him, but no one could look away. Social media splintered into a frenzy. Hashtags #enemy within and #stand with Jasmine trended side by side. The nation locked in a digital civil war, and still Jasmine stood. Slowly, deliberately, she leaned into her microphone. Her voice, calm and measured, landed like thunder after a storm. "You can shout, you can slander. You can call me every name you can find in your arsenal of hate, but you cannot erase the truth. And the truth is this: the louder you scream, the more the world sees what you really fear." The words lingered, heavy as stone. Trump froze for just a heartbeat, his lips trembling as if another insult was caught in his throat. The audience, both in the chamber and across America, held its breath. It was a duel of contrasts, rage against resolve, chaos against composure, fear against truth. And in that electrifying pause, one question rose above the noise, chilling and unshakable. If Trump had already resorted to fire and fury in the face of words, what would he unleash when the evidence cut even deeper? The chamber had barely recovered from Trump's verbal assault when a stir rippled through the gallery. The heavy doors creaked open again, and all heads turned. A figure stepped inside, white hair, mustache sharp as steel, eyes narrowed with cold determination. It was John Bolton, the man who once stood at Trump's right hand, now walking into the chamber like a ghost returning to haunt his former master. Reporters scrambled to capture the moment, cameras flashing like lightning strikes. Trump's face twisted instantly, the color draining and then returning in furious red. He muttered something under his breath too low for the microphones, but his glare said it all: hatred. Bolton ignored him completely, moving with deliberate steps toward the witness table. The silence was suffocating as he adjusted the microphone, cleared his throat, and began. "My name is John Bolton. I served as National Security Advisor to Donald Trump." His voice was steady, cold, the kind of voice that carried the weight of secrets too long buried. "And I am here today to confirm what many of you already suspect. Donald Trump's campaign of vengeance is real, it is deliberate, and it has already endangered lives, including mine." The room gasped. Some leaned forward, others recoiled. Trump shook his head violently, mouthing lies, all lies. But Bolton continued, undeterred. "In 2022, Bolton said, flipping through a folder, U.S. intelligence confirmed that an Iranian operative was prepared to pay $300,000 for my assassination. $300,000 for my life. This was not speculation. This was verified. And yet, instead of protecting me, President Trump ordered my security detail removed. He left me exposed, vulnerable, punished not by Iran, but by my own government because I wrote a book he didn't want the world to read." Shock rippled through the chamber like a thunderclap. Gasps turned into murmurs, murmurs into cries of disbelief. Outside, protesters froze mid-chant, their voices breaking as the news filtered through megaphones and cell phone screens. On cable networks, anchors fell silent, letting the footage play unbroken. The weight of Bolton's words more powerful than commentary. Trump slammed his hand down, shouting into the mic. "He's lying. He's a bitter man, a failed advisor. He's only here for revenge of his own. But his voice cracked, drowned by the growing chaos both inside and outside the chamber. Jasmine seized the moment, rising to her feet, her eyes locked on Trump. She didn't raise her voice, but the silence that fell gave her words the force of a hammer. Even your allies are discarded when your pride is hurt. Even those who served you are thrown to the wolves when they dare to tell the truth. If you would leave Bolton defenseless against assassins, what would you do to ordinary Americans who cannot fight back? The nation froze at her question. On screens across the country, her words were played in slow motion, echoing into the hearts of millions who now wondered if they too could one day be discarded. And as Trump's face contorted, his fists clenching in fury, one terrifying thought gripped the country. If vengeance could strip a man like Bolton of his protection, who in America was truly safe? The words had barely left Bolton's mouth before America itself seemed to erupt. Outside the Capitol, the streets became a battlefield of voices. On one side, the crowd thundered, "Justice for America," their chants rising like a war cry, echoing off monuments and government walls. On the other, a sea of red hats and banners surged back, screaming Trump 2020 for retribution. Until the two forces collided in a deafening wall of sound. Sirens blared, smoke rose from flares tossed into the air, and the line between protest and riot blurred in real time. Helicopters hovered above, cameras capturing the chaos as if it were a war zone. Cable news cut split screens, inside the chamber where Jasmine faced Trump, and outside, where democracy itself seemed to be tearing at the seams. Anchors spoke in hushed, stunned tones, some calling it the most volatile public display since the January 6th insurrection. The country is divided. Live on camera, in its rawest form, one commentator whispered. Amid the storm, Jasmine emerged from the chamber during a recess, swarmed instantly by reporters. Microphones crowded her face, lights blinding, questions hurled at her like bullets, but she didn't flinch. She raised a hand, silencing the frenzy with the same calm defiance that silenced Trump only hours before. Her voice, strong and unwavering, carried above the chaos. This is bigger than John Bolton. This is not about one man, one book, or one betrayal. This is about the future of America. Because if we allow vengeance to become the law of the land, then no one, no journalist, no protester, no voter is safe. The press froze, then erupted into a frenzy. Her words flashed across screens, were played on loop, plastered on headlines within minutes. Crockett, this is about America's future. Hashtags multiplied by the second. Hashtag Justice for America. Hashtag Crockett vs. Trump. Hashtag America and trial. Across TikTok, clips of Jasmine's declaration were cut with footage of the roaring protests, a cinematic juxtaposition of courage against chaos that went viral in minutes. Trump, watching from inside, fumed as the narrative slipped from his grip. He stormed into the hallway, snapping at reporters, calling Jasmine dangerous, delusional, and a liar propped up by the radical left, but the image was set. The contrast between his sputtering rage and her composed defiance spread like wildfire. As night fell, cities across the country lit up with marches. In New York, crowds filled Times Square with chants of justice for America. In Texas, counter-protesters waved Trump banners under the glow of stadium floodlights, chanting retribution now. The divide was no longer abstract, it was alive, pulsing in every street, every household, every screen. Inside her office, Jasmine watched the chaos unfold, her reflection caught in the glass window against the backdrop of firelit protests. For a brief moment, the weight of it pressed down on her chest, the gravity of standing against not just a man but a movement. Yet she straightened, because she knew hesitation would be fatal. And as the cameras turned back to her for the evening broadcast, the question that burned through the nose, sharper than sirens, louder than chants, pierced the soul of the nation. If democracy itself is now on trial, who will deliver the verdict, the people, or the man who demands vengeance? The chamber returned from recess, but the atmosphere was different now, thicker, heavier, charged with a tension that felt like live wires humming through the air. Trump sat hunched at the table, still seething, his jaw working furiously, while aides whispered frantically behind him. Jasmine, by contrast, was calm, unnervingly calm, her hand steady as she placed a sealed folder in front of her. The camera zoomed in on the manila file, like vultures circling prey. Everyone knew something devastating was about to be revealed. She stood, her voice crisp, precise. "Mr. Chairman, I have here documents obtained through Freedom of Information requests and corroborated by former officials. These records prove beyond any doubt that Donald Trump personally attempted to block the publication of John Bolton's memoir. The words dropped like lead into the silence. Reporters gasped. Phones lit up instantly. Screens across America flashed bold red banners. Crockett reveals. Trump tried to censor Bolton book. Jasmine held up a copy of an internal memo, stamped and signed, Trump's name glaring from the page like a scarlet brand. This memo, she continued, her finger tapping the signature line, was circulated within the White House. It ordered staff to pursue every possible legal avenue to stop Bolton's book from reaching the public. Not because it contained classified secrets it passed security review. No, the reason was far simpler. The truth inside humiliated Donald Trump. Trump shot up from his chair, his voice exploding through the microphone like a cannon blast. That book was treason. His face was red, his hands clenched, his voice raw with fury. Bolton betrayed me, betrayed America, and anyone who spreads his lies is complicit. You, Crockett, are defending treason. His words echoed off the chamber walls, a tirade of rage that left the room stunned. But in that outburst, something slipped. Polling agencies, running live trackers during the broadcast, flashed their results within minutes. 62% of viewers said they were shocked by Trump's admission that he tried to suppress the book. Networks projected the numbers on split screens, showing Trump raging on one side, Jasmine standing firm on the other, and the public's disbelief mounting with every second. Jasmine waited for the roar to fade, then spoke again, her voice low, deliberate. This is the pattern. Silence those who tell the truth. Punish those who won't bend the knee. Turn government into a shield for yourself, and a sword against your critics. That is not leadership. That is fear masquerading as power. The chamber erupted in overlapping shouts, Republicans demanding order, Democrats pounding the table in support, reporters shouting questions. Outside, the protests swelled, the chants of justice for America, drowning out retribution now. Helicopters circled lower, their floodlights slicing through the chaos below. And as Trump slammed his fists into the table again, his rage consuming him, the image on America's screens crystallized into something unforgettable. A leader cornered by his own truth, and a woman unafraid to expose it, because when the truth itself becomes treason in the eyes of power, the question is no longer about Bolton's book, it is about whether America still has the courage to read its own story. The chamber bowled with no shouts, gavel strikes, reporters barking questions, but Jasmine stood, untouched in the storm, her gaze fixed like a laser on the man across from her. Trump, fists still pounding, face crimson with rage, suddenly found himself under a silence more dangerous than any insult. Jasmine leaned forward, her voice quiet but sharpened like a blade meant to pierce. Leadership, she said, each syllable deliberate, isn't about crushing enemies. It's about lifting a nation. The words didn't echo, they caught. The room fell dead still. Even the restless shuffling of papers, the buzz of phones, the whispers in the gallery stopped. Cameras zoomed in on the moment, the split screen beaming into every living room. Jasmine, eyes blazing with conviction, and Trump, caught mid-motion, his jaw hanging slightly open as though the words had struck him harder than any accusation yet. For the first time, Donald Trump froze, his mouth opened to respond, but no sound came. He gripped the microphone, knuckles white, then let it go, staring at Jasmine as if searching for a counterpunch that wouldn't arrive. The cameras feasted on the silence, lingering mercilessly, amplifying the absence of words until it thundered louder than his roars. The nation gasped. On social media, clips went viral within seconds. Trump speechless trended at #1. Millions replaying the footage over and over the moment the self-proclaimed strongman faltered. In living rooms and bars across America, people leaned closer to their screens, some cheering, some stunned, but all united in disbelief that Donald Trump, the man who always had a comeback, had none. Outside, the chants shifted. Protesters who had been clashing in the streets fell into a rhythm. Lift the nation, lift a nation. The words Jasmine had just spoken became a rallying cry, spreading like wildfire through live streams and hashtags. Supporters waved banners into the night sky, their voices merging into a chorus that echoed beyond the Capitol walls. Inside, Trump's allies tried to break the moment, banging on desks, shouting interruptions, but it was too late. The damage was done. The cameras had already captured it. The world had already seen it, and the image was irreversible. A president silenced, trapped in the spotlight of his own undoing. Jasmine did not gloat. She simply held her gaze, letting the silence stretch, letting the weight of her words suffocate him. In her eyes there was no triumph, only resolve, the kind of resolve that reminded America why she stood there, unshaken, against the most powerful man in the country. And as the moment dragged on, unbearable in its tension, one chilling realization began to crystallize in the minds of millions watching. If a single sentence could freeze Donald Trump, what would happen when the full truth finally struck him with nowhere left to run? The silence that had frozen Trump was still rippling outward when his allies scrambled into action. One by one, Republican lawmakers slammed their fists on the table, shouting into microphones, desperate to drown out the humiliation their leader had just endured. "This is a witch hunt," one bellowed. "She's grandstanding for the cameras," cried another. The chamber descended into chaos, their words clattering against marble like shattered glass, but the harder they shouted, the more it sounded like panic, not power. Fox News anchors raced to spin the moment, replaying Trump's silence but framing it as restraint, yet cracks were already visible. Conservative columnist Eric Erickson tweeted bluntly, "This wasn't strength, this was fear." And then came the bombshell. The Wall Street Journal's editorial board, normally a bastion of Republican defense, released a statement mid-hearing. It read, simply, "America is not served by vengeance disguised as leadership." Last night's silence spoke louder than words. Gasps swept through newsrooms. CNN and MSNBC broke into live coverage reading the statement aloud, their banners flashing in red. Wall Street Journal, Trump's silence was fear. Within hours, the National Review piled on with its own sharp rebuke. The movement that began as populism is collapsing into personal vendetta. Even Trump's allies must ask, at what cost? Outside, the streets bowled over. Where chants had once been split, they now escalated into violence. In Chicago, clashes broke out between pro-Trump marchers and counter-protesters, police lines overwhelmed as fists and flags turned into weapons. In Atlanta, firecrackers exploded in the night sky as dueling rallies collided. Social unrest wasn't just visible, it was alive, raw, and pulsing through every American city. In the heart of it, Jasmine emerged again to the press, her face illuminated by floodlights, her words delivered with surgical precision. "This is no longer about left or right, this is about whether America will be governed by law or by fear. If our institutions can be twisted into tools of vengeance once, they can be twisted again. And if a man will abandon his allies for pride, what will stop him from abandoning his country?" Her voice carried, unshaken, even as chants and sirens swirled around her. Trump, meanwhile, retreated behind closed doors, his advisors in disarray. Some urged him to strike harder, others whispered caution. The one truth lingered like poison in the air. For the first time in years, Donald Trump looked mortal, and his own party was beginning to notice. The images flooded every screen. Jasmine standing firm as America roared outside. Trump boxed into silence while his defenders faltered. For millions watching at home, the question no longer felt abstract. It was visceral, urgent, unavoidable. Was this the night America finally began to turn its back on vengeance and on the man who built his empire upon it? The chamber was already a tinderbox when Trump erupted. He shot out of his chair, slamming his fists against the table so hard the microphone screeched in protest. His voice tore through the air like a whip. "She's a disgrace. She's destroying America." Spit flew with every syllable, veins bulging at his temples, his fury no longer controlled but unleashed raw and unfiltered before the eyes of the nation. He turned his wrath not just on Jasmine, but on everyone in sight. The Democrats are liars, the media are traitors. And Jasmine Crockett, she's the worst of them all. A fraud, a criminal, a radical who wants to tear this country down piece by piece. His finger jabbed at the cameras, at the reporters, scribbling furiously, at the Democrats pounding their desks in outrage. "You're all the enemy. You're all part of this conspiracy against me, against you, against America." The chamber dissolved into chaos. Republicans rose to their feet, clapping, cheering, chanting his name like a rally inside Congress itself. Democrats shouted back, demanding order, their voices drowned by the roar of Trump's loyalists. The chairman's gavel pounded desperately, but the sound was swallowed whole by the storm outside. The fury caught fire. Screens beamed Trump's tirade onto giant billboards, his words blasting through megaphones carried by his supporters. Crowds in red hats screamed Trump, 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 while waving flags like weapons. Others answered with chants of justice for America. The two sides clashed in waves of noise and anger, the streets of Washington, D.C. vibrating like the epicenter of an earthquake. Inside, Trump's rant grew darker. His eyes wild, his face drenched in sweat, he roared, "They want to silence me, because I stand for you, but they will never silence me. We will have retribution, and we will take back this country by any means necessary." His words sent a jolt through the chamber, half the lawmakers recoiling in horror, the other half electrified by the naked promise of vengeance. News networks scrambled, anchors interrupting their own broadcasts with breaking banners. Trump, "We will have retribution by any means necessary." Analysts stared into the camera with visible disbelief. Commentators whispered that this wasn't just rhetoric anymore, it was a declaration, a threat hurled into the bloodstream of a divided nation. And through it all, Jasmine remained seated, steady, her eyes locked on him, refusing to flinch. The cameras captured the contrast again, a woman unyielding against a man consumed by rage. It was no longer just politics, it was theater of survival, justice versus chaos, restraint against destruction. The moment stretched until it felt unbearable, a country holding its breath in fear and fury. And as Trump pounded the table once more, his voice echoing through history, the question that spread like wildfire across living rooms, newsrooms, and streets was as chilling as it was inevitable. If this is the fury he unleashes inside the halls of Congress, what kind of storm will he summon once the doors swing open to the nation? When the roar of Trump's fury finally ebbed, it left behind an echoing silence, a vacuum waiting to be filled. All eyes turned to Jasmine Crockett. She did not stand in anger, nor raise her voice to match his rage. Instead, she leaned into the microphone, her tone calm, firm, and cutting through the chaos like a blade of ice. "You cannot silence the truth with rage." The chamber stilled. Trump's face contorted, but Jasmine pressed on, her voice gathering strength, each word carrying the weight of the communities she represented. "For years, Mr. Trump, you have ruled by fear. You have weaponized power to punish dissent, and in doing so, you have abandoned the very people who trusted you most. Minority communities, immigrants, working families, they have paid the price. For your pride." She raised a document, the pages trembling slightly under the fluorescent light, but her hand steady with conviction. "Under your administration, Black-owned businesses collapsed at twice the national rate. Latino families were torn apart at the border. Communities of color were surveilled, targeted, and silenced. And while they cried for justice, you turned their pain into a punchline at rallies." The words hit like strikes of thunder, each statistic a wound laid bare for the nation to see. The crowd outside heard her words broadcast live on giant screens. Protesters chanting "Justice for America" roared louder, their voices now infused with her language. In living rooms, millions of Americans leaned forward, some in tears, others in awe, as Jasmine's composure became more powerful than any outburst. She continued, her voice thick with emotion but never faltering. "I am here not just as a congresswoman, but as a daughter of the South, as the granddaughter of those who marched when they were told to sit down, as the voice of every child who has been told they don't matter. We matter. We will always matter. And no amount of vengeance will erase us from the story of America." The chamber was silent except for the scratch of reporters' ends and the hum of cameras zooming closer to her face. Even Trump's allies falter, their applause and shouts withering in the force of her words. She paused, letting the silence breathe, then delivered the final blow. "You want to make this about vengeance, but I will make this about justice. And justice is louder than your rage, stronger than your threats, and bigger than your name." The nation trembled in that pause. And as Jasmine held her gaze steady, millions watching across America whispered the same question. If one woman's voice could pierce through his fury, what else could it shatter before this battle was over? The hearing had not even adjourned when the first clips hit TikTok and YouTube. One video, a perfect split screen of Trump's explosive tirade against Jasmine's calm defiance, was captioned in bold, "Crockett versus Trump. The moment of truth." Within an hour it hit 3 million views. By nightfall, it was everywhere. Teens in high schools, veterans in diners, workers on factory floors, everyone had seen it, everyone had an opinion, and the country was splitting itself apart in the comment section of America out on Twitter. Hashtags collided like armies. Hashtag Stand with Jasmine trended alongside hashtag Retribution224. Memes spread like wildfire, some mocking Trump's reddened face frozen in silence, others hailing Jasmine as the iron spine of Congress. Instagram Reels replayed her words, "You cannot silence the truth with rage," cut over images of civil rights marches and American flags. For her supporters, she had become more than a politician. She was a symbol, a living reminder that justice could still stare down vengeance and not blink. Cable networks poured gasoline on the fire. CNN replayed the exchange with dramatic lower thirds. Crockett holds the line. Fox News countered with graphic screaming. Radical left. Circus. MSNBC cut to interviews with activists who hailed her as the voice of the silenced. By midnight, commentators across the spectrum admitted one thing: the confrontation had already become one of the most consequential political moments of the decade. But the public was not united. In rural towns, Trump's base gathered in bars, watching replays of his outbursts with cheers and raised fists. "He's fighting for us," one man shouted at the TV, his voice drowned out by chants of "Trump, Trump." Meanwhile, in city squares, Jasmine's words were projected onto buildings, cheered by crowds who carried banners reading, "Justice for America. Justice for all." Even the polling reflected the schism. Overnight surveys showed Trump's loyalists digging in deeper, but independents and moderates shifted sharply, 58% calling Jasmine the clearer voice of leadership in the hearing. The numbers scrolled across screens, turning the moment into more than rhetoric. It was measurable, undeniable, historic. And through it all, Jasmine remained steady. She gave a brief statement to the press before slipping back into the shadows of the Capitol. No gloating, no theatrics, just the steady insistence that truth would not be silenced. It was the restraint, that quiet fire, that made her words echo even louder across a fractured nation. And as the country roared with fury and hope in equal measure, one chilling question lingered. In the storm of rage, can justice still find its voice, or will it be drowned before the verdict is heard? The hearing resumed, under the weight of a nation already on edge. Jasmine Crockett rose once more, this time carrying a folder thicker than any before. Her tone was steady, but beneath it was a sharpened fury, the kind born from truth too dangerous to ignore. She let the silence hang for a moment, forcing the cameras to tighten on her face. Before she spoke, "What we are witnessing is not the act of one man alone. It is a machine at hidden network feeding his vendetta, and the evidence is here." She opened the folder, revealing pages stamped with seals, signatures, timelines. Her words landed like hammer blows. Since 2023, more than 300 subpoenas have been issued. 300 legal weapons, not aimed at criminals, but at critics, journalists, former staffers, activists, anyone who dared to question Donald Trump. Gasps erupted across the chamber. Reporters scrambled to relay the number, their voices trembling as they repeated it on live feeds. 300. The figure scrolled across television screens in bold rate. Crockett. 300, plus subpoenas targeting critics. Jasmine flipped another page, her voice cutting deeper. And who carried out this crusade? Loyal aides like Kash Patel, installed not to serve the people, but to serve the man. Intelligence funneled, investigations manipulated, resources twisted into weapons of revenge. This is not law, this is not justice. This is authoritarianism disguised in the language of democracy. The audience in the gallery shifted uneasily, some shaking their heads in disbelief, others erupting in anger. Outside, the chants grew louder, sirens wailed, the pressure of the streets pressing into the chamber itself. Trump banged the table, shouting, "Lies, fabrications, she's making this up." But his words, drowned by the roar of outrage beyond the walls, felt smaller this time, weaker, stripped of the force they once carried. Jasmine's voice did not waver. 300 subpoenas, 300 leads disrupted. This is not governance. This is not security. This is vengeance, systematic, organized, relentless. And every American watching tonight must ask themselves, if this machine can come for them, who will be left to stand when it finally comes for you? The room froze, the question hanging heavy, burning through screens into the hearts of millions. Because when justice is twisted into a weapon, the betrayal isn't just of the system, it's of the nation itself. The number 300 subpoenas ignited the country like a spark to dry grass. By nightfall, protests erupted not just in Washington, but in every corner of America. In New York, thousands flooded Times Square, their chants bouncing between towering screens. Justice for America. In Texas, crowds surged down white highways, waving banners, some demanding freedom from Trump's vengeance, others clashing with counter-protesters crying Retribution 2024. Helicopters cut through the skies, their searchlights illuminating a nation split open. But it wasn't only the numbers that pierced hearts, it was the stories that followed. On live broadcasts, immigrants stepped forward with trembling voices, recalling how subpoenas had torn families apart. A factory worker from Ohio testified in front of cameras, explaining how his union was targeted after refusing to endorse Trump. Mothers in Arizona wept as they described being surveilled. Their community leader silenced by investigations with no charges, no justice, only fear. Each story added flesh and blood to the statistics Jasmine had revealed, turning outrage into solidarity. And in the middle of the storm, Jasmine's voice cut through. She spoke outside the Capitol, her face illuminated by a flood of microphones and phone cameras. "This fight is not mine alone," she declared, her voice rising above the chants. "It belongs to every immigrant who refused to be invisible, to every worker punished for speaking out, to every community silenced but never broken. Tonight, you are my strength. Tonight, America stands together." Her words rippled outward, replayed on phones in subway cars, bars, and living rooms. For the first time in years, millions felt not fear but hope. Networks plastered her face on their screens, branding her the people's champion. Social media exploded with artwork, memes, and hashtags, turning her into a symbol of resistance. To her critics, she was dangerous. To her supporters, she was unstoppable. But no one could deny one truth: she had become the lightning rod of a nation desperate for a voice that would not bow. And as America's streets shook with both rage and resolve, one question spread like fire, whispered in every crowd and etched across every screen. If Jasmine Crockett can awaken a movement this powerful, will it be strong enough to break the chains of vengeance before they strangle the nation whole? Trump's fury did not cool, it metastasized. He lunged back to the microphone, eyes blazing, words spit out like venom. "Chris Christie, traitor, Wes Moore, coward." His voice cracked, rising above the pounding gavel as if the chamber itself could not contain him. "Anyone who crosses me, anyone who dares to question me, will pay. I will crush them all." His fist slammed the table, and the sound reverberated like a gunshot. The chamber gasped. Members leaned back in their seats, stunned at the open threat hurled against sitting officials. Reporters scribbled furiously, some shaking their heads in disbelief. On screens across the nation, ink is cut in with breaking banners. Trump lashes out at Christie. "Wes Moore live." The footage replayed instantly, his voice echoing across social media with captions, "This is not strength. This is vengeance." Jasmine rose slowly, her eyes never leaving his face. The room, still trembling from Trump's outburst, quieted as she leaned into the microphone. Her voice carried none of his rage, only an iron clarity. "You prove my point with every word you speak. This is not leadership. This is tyranny." The words struck like a lightning bolt. Protesters outside roared louder, their chants shifting in unison. "This is tyranny. This is tyranny." The sound carried through the Capitol walls, shaking the chamber as if the building itself was crying out. Trump tried to retort, his lips moving, but his voice faltered, swallowed by the chants echoing beyond the marble. The camera zoomed in on his face, the sweat, the twitch of his jaw, the tremor in his hands. For the first time, the image of invincibility was crumbling before millions of witnesses. Jasmine seized the silence, her voice slicing through like a final verdict. Every subpoena, every insult, every threat. It all leads here to a man so consumed with revenge he would burn the nation to feed his pride. But America will not bow to vengeance. America will not surrender to tyranny. The chamber thundered. With gasps and shouts, the nation split but shaken to its core. And as the clip raced across every platform, America found itself staring into a mirror too sharp to ignore. Because when a tyrant is finally exposed, the question is no longer whether he will fall but whether the people will have the courage to make the choice. The chamber quaked with tension. The chants outside rumbled like distant thunder, the gavel strikes powerless against the storm of voices. Cameras zoomed tight on Jasmine Crockett, As she rose for her closing statement, the weight of a fractured nation balanced on her shoulders. The moment had arrived, the final blow, the knockout strike. She steadied herself, her voice low at first, then rising with the cadence of history. Power without justice is not leadership. It is vengeance, and vengeance, she paused, locking eyes with Trump, has no place in America. The words detonated in the chamber. Reporters froze mid-scribble, lawmakers sat motionless, and millions across the country felt the chill crawl up their spines. It wasn't just a statement, it was a verdict. Trump sat rigid, his hands gripping the edge of the table. He opened his mouth, but no words came. His face drained of color, his lips trembled, and for the second time, Donald Trump, the man who never backed down, who always had a comeback, was silent. The cameras feasted on it, zooming closer, capturing every flicker of panic in his eyes. His silence thundered louder than his rage ever had. Jasmine pressed on, her voice fierce, her conviction unshakable. This nation does not belong to vengeance, it belongs to the people. It belongs to the workers who've been silenced, the families torn apart, the communities targeted. It belongs to those who still believe that justice is not a weapon, but a shield. Her words rang through the chamber like church bells, unrelenting, impossible to ignore. Outside, the chants shifted in perfect unison, as if the country itself had absorbed her words. No more vengeance, no more vengeance. The sound surged into the night sky, echoing across cities, vibrating through the veins of a divided America. Trump froze, cornered not by subpoenas or headlines, but by truth itself. And in that silence, the image was burned into history. A titan brought to stillness, a woman unbroken, and as millions watch, holding their breath, one question cut deeper than any gavel strike. If vengeance has no place in America, will the people finally find the courage to tear it out by the roots? By dawn, the headlines screamed across every major outlet like trumpets announcing a new era. Crockett crushes Trump's vendetta campaign. Moment of truth. Crockett silences Trump. Clips of her final words looped on every channel, her face juxtaposed with Trump's frozen silence. The image was unforgettable. One woman standing tall while a man built on bluster crumbled before the nation. Crowds poured into the streets, no longer just protesters, but a movement. In New York, thousands gathered at Union Square holding handmade signs, "Truth greater than vengeance and we stand with Jasmine." In Atlanta, a church choir marched shoulder to shoulder with activists, their hymns of justice ringing out as both prayer and protest. In California, students flooded college campuses with rallies, chanting her words, "Power without justice is vengeance." The scenes became a living montage, faces captured in raw emotion. A Latina mother clutching her child, tears streaking her cheeks as she whispered, "She spoke for us." A retired steelworker raising his weathered hands, shouting with joy. Finally, someone stood up to him. A group of young black men in Chicago, fists raised high, declaring into the night, "She is our voice." Each image cut together, broadcast on loop, forming a collective heartbeat of a country shaken but unbroken. And yet, anger simmered alongside the hope. Trump's supporters raged, waving banners of defiance, vowing that this was not the end. Their chants of retribution 2024 clashed with justice for America. As America's cities pulsed with the sound of two futures colliding, the nation stood at the edge of something new, uncertain whether it was the dawn of healing or the spark of deeper conflict. Through it all, Jasmine Crockett's name became more than a headline, it became a symbol. To many, she was no longer just a congresswoman, but a warrior of principle, a mirror reflecting the nation's conscience. She had not only faced Trump, she had forced America to look inward, to ask whether it would bow to fear or rise to justice. And as the cameras captured the tidal wave of rallies, tears, anger, and celebration, one question remained, unshakable, echoing louder than any chant. In a country awakening from the grip of vengeance, will America choose justice before it's too late? The dust of chaos began to settle, but the echoes of Jasmine Crockett's stand reverberated across the nation. Her words were no longer confined to the marble walls of Congress, they were painted on banners, etched into chants, replayed endlessly. On screens, to millions, she had become more than a lawmaker. She was a warrior for justice, the living embodiment of defiance against tyranny. Documentaries began airing montages of her sharp gaze locked on Trump's silence, her steady voice cutting through storms of rage. Commentators described it as the moment America found its spine. Civil rights leaders compared her courage to the giants of history, while young activists scrawled her quotes across protest art, in classrooms, in union halls, in city squares. Her words had become gospel, a reminder that truth can withstand even the loudest roar of vengeance. On the Capitol steps, addressing a sea of supporters, Jasmine delivered her final message, her voice carrying across the night like a bell tolling. For freedom, democracy survives not because of power, not because of wealth, not because of fear. Democracy survives because of people who dare to speak truth, people who refuse to be silenced, even when the cost is great. Tonight, we proved that one voice, armed with courage, can still challenge the weight of tyranny. The crowd erupted, some in tears, some with fists raised, the sound of hope thundering through the city. But Jasmine did not smile. Her face was resolute, her tone edged with warning. She knew the battle was not finished, only transformed. The broadcast lingered on her words, cameras zooming in as she delivered the closing line that would etch itself into history. If vengeance knocks at America's door again, will we have the courage to resist? The question hung heavy, haunting, impossible to ignore. Living rooms fell silent, protesters froze mid-chant, even her fiercest critics paused. It was not just a challenge to Trump or to politicians, it was a challenge to the people themselves, and as the screen faded to black, one truth remained unshakable: the legacy of courage is not written by those who seek vengeance, but by those who dare to stop it. True power is not found in vengeance, but in the courage to stand for justice when it matters most. Jasmine Crockett's fight reminds us that even in the face of rage, truth can never be silenced. In our own lives, we may not stand in Congress, but every day we face choices whether to stay quiet or to speak for what is right. Change begins with ordinary people daring to rise. If her courage inspired you, hit the like button, share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories that prove justice always finds a voice. Thank you for watching until this moment and for standing with us on this journey for justice. Your support means everything. Like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss what's next. And we'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment below and let us know what moved you most in this story. Together, our voices make a difference.